Hey, this is Dr. Vinay Prasad from the University of California, San Francisco. I'm back with a new video called Should I Be a Critic? Yes, it's hard and desperately needed. Recently, I was on social media where I heard the popular refrain for the 100th time, which is, it's easy to criticize, it's hard to do. By this, the person means that it's a lot harder to be a, say, trialist than it is to poke holes in a trial. See, I believe that this kind of argument is technically inaccurate and illogical and actually works to stifle legitimate and thoughtful criticism. And so let me take you through that. One, I think we just have to recognize right off the bat that it is, in fact, technically inaccurate that there are many critics and few doers. In fact, if you were to survey academic medical oncology, you would find that there are many more people with so-called cookie-cutter trialist careers than there are thoughtful critics. In fact, you can probably count the thoughtful critics in one hand. People like Ian Tannock, people like Tito Fojo. They are few and far between, people who have spent significant professional time being critical of published clinical trials. In fact, it's far easier to be an oncology cheerleader than it is to be a thoughtful critic. So if one were to step back and look at the landscape, one would undoubtedly find there are many more trialists than there are thoughtful critics. Next, I think it's undeniable that working hand in glove with the industry is beneficial for your career. This was an analysis we published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, where we found that even if you adjust for certain predictors of publication, financial conflict remains a predictor of future publications. So what do I mean by that? If you were to look at how many papers somebody has published previously and their seniority or age or their portion of their career, you will find that those are both predictors of future publications. That people who publish more continue to publish more, and people who are earlier in their career continue to publish more than people who are later in their career. And what you'll find is, in multivariate analysis, that the amount of financial conflicts, personal payments, even adjusting for prior publications, seniority, and research funding, remains an independent predictor of future publications. In other words, if the problem is a chicken and egg problem between the industry funding and having a career, it appears that what came first was the conflict of interest, and then that led to the career. And I believe this suggests that it is, in fact, a lot more difficult to buck the interests of the industry than it is to go along with them. So I want to say that criticism, thoughtful criticism in the academic context, it's actually extremely hard and extremely rare. One, it leaves an individual incredibly precariously poised and vulnerable. If you want to go and criticize clinical studies, you best be right. You best bring your A game. It's not easy. And in fact, you leave yourself quite vulnerable to counterattack if in fact you're wrong. Two, I think you got to be clever. You got to be creative. In fact, good criticism is more creative than the trial itself. It's a lot harder to spot the flaws in a trial than it is to design a trial. I think that that's just a fact. And the best and most thoughtful critics are some of the most clever people in not only recognizing the pitfalls, but finding the right way to show those pitfalls to others and convince others. Three, I think good criticism is very hard because the best criticism is invalidating. It doesn't just poke holes, as some would say. It is so thoroughly decimating that there is nothing left standing, that the claim from the fundamental article cannot sustain itself. And that's what good criticism is. It's invalidating. I think one of the challenges of being a thoughtful critic is, in fact, you'll have to write your own papers. You'll have to write all of them. There'll never be a medical writer gifted to you by the sponsoring company. And you have to face an uphill battle in peer review. The majority of expert oncologists are on the take, receiving personal financial payments from the industry. And you will have to sustain a very difficult peer review process. And so that goes into being a thoughtful critic. It's what makes it not so hard. In fact, probably harder than being a trialist in the first place. Thoughtful critics are needed now more than ever. We need you to join our ranks. We need you to try to be a thoughtful critic because medicine is broken. It is deeply broken. The incentives are skewed, misaligned. The amount we spend on healthcare, $1 in $5 of GDP, and rapidly climbing, is unsustainable. It has stifled the wages of average people. It's led to likely massive societal discontent, and it doesn't deliver what we pay for. It is a deeply flawed and broken system, and if you sit by in the 21st century and do nothing, you are part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. Two, corruption is rampant. One of the ways in which the system perpetuates itself is that there are financial remuneration given to people who play along. And so being a thoughtful critic often cuts against your financial interest and is needed to fight, I think, the rampant corruption in the space. But you may be thinking, but I have to be careful in my career. I can't afford to take a gamble. Well, I would want to assure you that, as a physician in the 21st century in the United States, it's very unlikely that you're ever going to go hungry. It's very unlikely you're not going to have a job. And so you do have some professional allowance, some space to operate. And you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do with your life? Do you want to go about things and never take a stand and never try to make the system better? Or do you want to take what very precious and little time you have and try to improve things and draw attention to what's really problematic? There's an old quote by Euripides that says, "I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees." And that's never been more true than in the modern space. You really need to speak up, or you're just going to continue to live on your knees. So those are my thoughts on being a thoughtful critic. I think it's a lot harder than it looks. It's a lot harder than being a trialist. There are few and far between when it comes to thoughtful critics, and we need more people to join the ranks. So if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and check out the podcast Plenary Session.